Hatred destroys the one who hates. The others that you hated go on about their business. Care less.
So the legacy of Medgar Evers is an understanding of our own humanity and of our own responsibility of seeing that in other people.
He is written out of history. He's just not included as Malcolm and Martin. To me, it's the 3 M's, and Medgar's right up there at the lead.
Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Watch now on MPB Passport. Visit mpbonline.org for more. Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
What's happening, Mississippi? You have found the sit-down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We take every week and explore the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. I don't know if Lane Kiffin is going to shape Mississippi's future, but he sure as heck has generated a lot of chatter, a lot of conversation, not just in Mississippi, across the country. And in some ways, it has transcended sports. You've got politicians weighing in. You had a politician involved in Louisiana. You got politicians in Mississippi cutting TikTok videos now, making fun of Kiffin. You got Fox News hosts talking about it. But I wanted to talk today with somebody who actually knows something about football and has been covering this stuff for an awfully long time. Neal McCready, probably the best in the business in Mississippi. Neal, glad to have you with us.
It's good to be with you. That's very kind. Thank you.
So I spoke yesterday at an event. It was a luncheon. And I led with this, or something similar to this, which was I'm here today to talk about two groups of people that hate each other, have hated each other for a very long time, are separated only by an imaginary border, and things have been ratcheted up recently to the point that they want to kill each other. And then I had to remind them that I was there to talk about Israel and not Lane Kiffin and LSU and Ole Miss. And so obviously things have been ratcheted up, Neal, at an incredible level, maybe too much, honestly. But I am curious, if you're looking at the landscape of sort of the history of college football and coaches that have moved from one location to another location, where does the Lane Kiffin saga rate in terms of just chaos?
Oh, I mean, I have a hard time thinking of one that was more chaotic, that has wreaked more havoc than this one. This has been going on for weeks now. I thought it was pretty obvious where this was headed, although I would have bet 6 weeks ago that it was Florida. And then when LSU got more heavily involved, I knew it was going to be LSU. You throw in the playoff, the ongoing playoff, a coach quitting on his playoff-bound team. I can't think of one that was more chaotic than this. I mean, you've had some, you've had some coaching searches that were chaotic after a season. Nick Saban leaving the Dolphins to go to Alabama, for example. But it's nothing like this, where people have very clearly taken marching orders from agencies, from networks, where people have said things that there's no way they actually believe on national television. This is one that at some point someone won't be me, but someone will write one hell of a book about this chapter.
You could absolutely write that book. Don't sell yourself short.
It won't be me,
won't be you.
Someone will. Yeah.
So, no, I mean, look, I've been involved in political fights my whole life, so that's really sort of what I know. I'm a fan. I know that you're not as much a fan. In fact, you make a point to say, I'm not a fan, which is why I think you do your job well. But in politics, people think things are happening organically sometimes, or that messages take off organically. And that's almost never the case. There's like 99% of people on the internet that are saying things that have no idea what they're talking about. But then there's the 1% that are saying things that are really surrogate messages. They know what's going on. They have marching orders, and they get out there and do political battle. And you alluded to this, but I've seen you also post about this on the internet, on Twitter and whatnot. It very much seemed like that was happening with ESPN.
It absolutely happened. There's no question that it happened. You know, I get criticized, Russ, because I don't watch ESPN Game Day on Saturday mornings. My son is he's 19 now, so he's in college. But the last, I don't know, 10 years, he's a big soccer player. He played travel soccer. He was an all-state soccer player at Oxford High School. And so Saturday mornings, we would watch English Premier League. You know, if I was around before I went to a game or whatever, I just didn't watch Game Day. I don't think it's a very good show. I think it's contrived. I know fans love it. It's a table setter. But the last few weeks, I've made myself watch it because I could tell that there was a message that was trying to be delivered, that they were trying to influence the committee. Kirk Herbstreit is a CAA client. Nick Saban, obviously, a CAA client, one of maybe the greatest coach in the history of college football, but he's up there and he has a large, loud mouthpiece, and he was using it. And they were starting this narrative that Lane Kiffin, if he left Ole Miss, should be allowed to coach in the CFP, college football playoffs. And I thought, you don't believe that. Nick Saban, if I told you, if we had a time machine and you and I went back and I said, Nick Saban's team made the playoffs and he didn't coach it, you would have assumed one of two things, and one of two things only. Either he died or he had gotten sick to the point that he was incapacitated. That was the only way. He would never have left his team to go to a rival team in the same league and let someone else coach his team in the playoffs. The notion of that was absurd. And when I heard him say it the first time, I said, this is over. Anybody who thinks Lane Kiffin's staying at Ole Miss, it just went away right there. And sure enough, that was the day that Ole Miss played Florida. And if you paid attention to Lane's press conference afterwards, and I was 10 feet from him, every answer was just another nail in that coffin. There's no way he was staying. No chance. And so it was interesting just to see that develop over the last couple of weeks. And then when it failed, and it failed on Sunday when Ole Miss basically told Keith Carter basically told Lane Kiffin, you can't do both. You can't have your, in Lane's case, sushi and eat it too. ESPN sort of dropped it. It was like, it wasn't even that big of a story last night. So I thought that was completely disingenuous, but fairly on brand for ESPN these days.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things I was going to ask you today, and I think maybe you've answered it, which is like, you obviously were one of the early adopters of he's leaving, right? I mean, you didn't say 100%. You said anything could happen, but it was very clear that you believed that he was leaving. It seems like that's a combination of instinct and tea leaves, and not that you had any sort of inside track on Lane Kiffin's brain.
Yeah, I watched him walk off the field in Athens. Ole Miss played Georgia. It was middle of October. It was a good game. Georgia pulled away late in the fourth quarter. The atmosphere there was really rowdy late in that game. And I just watched him walk off the field, and I told a couple of people that I work with or am colleagues with, texted a couple of people, and I said, he's gone. And I thought his postgame was indicative of a coach who had just seen something and confirmed something in his mind. And I guess I had to go back to my hotel, and then I drove all the way back from Georgia to Mississippi the next day, and was pretty much on the phone most of the time with people who I trusted and knew. And by the time I got back to Oxford, I would have bet a whole lot of money that he was leaving. And it was one of those things, Russ, where you have to be careful. I cover Ole Miss for 24/7 Sports, and it's one of those things that if I post that or I say that and then I'm wrong, you never live it down. And so you have to be really careful with that. And so I danced around it a little bit over the next few weeks, but I always believed that he was leaving. And, like I said, I would have bet Florida initially. At that time, Florida had let Billy Napier go. And then when the LSU thing got real, I knew he would pick LSU over Florida, in large part because his agency believes that's one of the best 2 or 3 jobs in the country. And his agency has not had that job, the LSU head coaching job, since Nick Saban left.
So walk us through maybe the last 48 hours, or really maybe the last couple of weeks. What led up to the decision that he made? You said Florida was in the lead and then maybe LSU came in late. Give me your sense of what happened in that last sort of chaotic period before the decision was announced.
You're referring to maybe the last week or so?
Yeah, the last week or so.
Yeah, I think he made his decision weeks ago. I never bought the whole "I'm torn" thing. I don't know what I'm doing thing. I just didn't believe that. I still don't. So yes, I mean, if someone says, "Are you saying he lied?" Yes, I am saying he lied. He desperately wanted to coach the playoff. He was trying to figure out a way to take the LSU job and then coach Ole Miss in the playoff. And where this thing would have gotten wild, Russ, I guess wild, it would have just been the same thing. Had Auburn beaten Alabama Saturday night, I think we're doing this for another week. I think this whole thing just gets delayed to Sunday. I think Ole Miss wanted to move on him a week earlier. They were very scared of the following. And it turns out that they were right that Keith Carter and Glenn Boyce and the decision makers at Ole Miss, despite the fact that some of their power brokers, some of their big boosters, stakeholders, if you will, were saying, move off of him, get rid of him, launch into a coaching search. They wanted to make the playoff game in Oxford that will happen now, December 19th or 20th. We're told is worth $50 to $70 million for the local economy. It's probably more your territory than it is mine, but that's what we're told. I'll have to take their word for it. And obviously, you couldn't afford to lose that. And the committee, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, looks at data points. And had Ole Miss gotten rid of Lane Kiffin, suspended him, whatever the word may be, and then gone to the Egg Bowl, for example, and lost, that would have been a data point that could be used against them. And when Ole Miss won in Starkville and then Texas beats Texas A&M, it created an Iron Bowl that mattered to Ole Miss. And had Auburn won, Ole Miss would have rolled this down the line another week because they didn't want to give that committee a data point that could be used against them. In other words, this is what this team looks like without Lane Kiffin. They're not a playoff team any longer. Let's knock them out. And so Ole Miss had to dance the dance. And it led to Saturday night, when Alabama did hold on and beat Auburn, and that put Alabama in the championship game Saturday in Atlanta against Georgia. It pushed Lane Kiffin out of clock. And at that point, Lane played hardball. Lane used the nuclear option where he told his offensive staff and maybe the whole defensive staff, you basically have an hour to get on the plane. If you want a job with me at LSU, you're going to get on that plane. Well, that led to some men having to make very difficult, hasty decisions. First day of December, 3.5 weeks from Christmas.
Sure.
You got people are having to make career decisions, money decisions, and Ole Miss had a decision to make, and I think it was pretty tenuous at points Sunday morning, which is, all right, do we give in and do we let the LSU coach us in the playoffs, which could be the next 20 days or the next 50 days, or do we bite the bullet here and make a change? And they ultimately chose the decision that I think is the decision of strength. I don't think you could ever live down allowing your playoff appearance to become an infomercial for another school, a rival school.
And it's very clear that's what they wanted to happen, right? I mean, Osbury has come out and said, we encouraged him to go coaching in the playoff games because that's great advertising for LSU.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And this is totally different than, say, John Summerall, in a world where, like, if whoever wins this American Athletic Conference game in New Orleans on Friday night, whether it's North Texas or Tulane, both of those coaches have moved on to other jobs. Eric Morris to Oklahoma State, John Summerall to Florida. Well, both of those schools are more than happy to let those guys coach. And then those schools are group of 5 schools. They don't mind allowing the coach who got them into the playoff and use that as a springboard to another job. They don't mind that because they can use that with another young coach going, see, this is why the Tulane job's a great job. You come in here, you work hard, you get us to the playoffs, look what happens to you. Ole Miss couldn't do that. Ole Miss couldn't go sit in the corner chair and say, oh, yeah, we're cool with – I just can't do that. I mean, it would have been such an awful look. I dreaded it because I was going to have to
Well,
Just
you know, and
excoriate Ole
it
Miss.
turns out, too, and we got to take a little break, but it turns out, too, that when Tulane plays Florida, which happens very infrequently, there's not a trophy that the winner gets at the end of the game. It's a very different thing comparing a Tulane to Florida move to an Ole Miss to LSU move, an Oxford to Baton Rouge move. We're talking with Neal McCready. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a companion podcast to Mississippi Public Broadcasting's documentary Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking today with Neal McCready about the Lane Kiffin saga. You know, it's interesting to me, this may be a bad analogy, but if you've had 6 relationships in your life, long-term relationships, and every single one of them ends in a blaze of glory, it may be that you're really bad at picking partners, or you may be the common denominator in the problem. It seems like Lane Kiffin is the common denominator across all these coaching jobs that he's had. There are a lot of people who have defended him by saying, hey, he's a victim of the schedule. And look, the college football playoff schedule sucks. I'm willing to acknowledge that. But it's not so much the what in this instance in my mind, Neal. It's the how. You know, you got the Kiffin 2026 visors going up on X. You got him not answering your questions in a press conference, but then going on Pat McAfee and being willing to answer questions when it feels scripted, right? You've got Juice Kiffin, who's not even
scripted,
who's not even his dog, right? But Juice Kiffin tweeting out the night of the Iron Bowl about the SEC championship game in Ole Miss, right? Within 12 hours, he's gone. So all of these things, I'm just curious your reaction. Like, is there some defect in Lane Kiffin's brain that puts him in these situations?
I can't speak to his brain, but I'll speak to his character. Unless you want to assume that, unless you're willing to take the leap that a Labrador Retriever put out that tweet, which would be, like I've said, if that's the case, we're all missing.
Phenomenal dog.
Here. Yeah. Look, you know this, Russ. Sometimes opportunities come up in life that deep down you're really curious about, but you just can't because the timing's not right. Maybe it's not right for your children. Maybe it's not right for your wife. Maybe it's just not a good time for you to take a job. It's happened to me 2 or 3 times. And sometimes you just have to do the right thing. And you can debate the college football calendar, and it's horrible. It needs to be fixed. I mean, the sport's broken right now. The fans love it anyway, but it speaks to the power of alma mater, I think. Look, if Lane Kiffin had said, yeah, I was presented with an opportunity that in another world I probably would have thought about jumping at, but I can't leave this team. This is my team. I wish the calendar were different. I wish that we had more of a professional calendar, one that modeled the NFL calendar. That would make this better. We should fix it. I'm staying here. I think people would have generally said, gosh, I almost kind of sympathize with him, and I'm glad he stayed. He's coaching his team. Instead, he lied. He trolled. He got mad when he was told that he trolled. He pushed back on, I'm trolling. And you're like, well, that's trolling. I think it's just revelatory of character or lack thereof. And look, I've covered Lane for 6 years. I generally like Lane. I respect him. He's an elite football coach. He's an elite offensive mind. He did an amazing job at Ole Miss, 50 wins in 5 years. There's only 7 programs in the country that can say that. But it doesn't change the fact that what he did, leaving a team on the cusp of the playoffs, is reprehensible. It's something that will haunt him, I believe, for the rest of his career. And it's something that I think will end up being a big part of his legacy. And that's a shame, because taking Ole Miss to the college football playoff with the team that's capable of making some noise in that playoff would have been the crown jewel of his coaching career.
So I've been thinking about this over the last 24 hours. If you look at Brian Kelly's resume on paper before he got to LSU versus Lane Kiffin's resume on paper before he got to LSU, Brian Kelly's resume is better. He had a higher winning percentage by 5 percentage points, 73% of his games he'd won. He'd been to a national championship. He'd won a conference championship when he was at Cincinnati. Was a higher profiled, more experienced coach. And if you look at what got him fired this year, it was losing to number 6 ranked Ole Miss, number 7 ranked Texas A&M, and number 13th ranked Vanderbilt. Compare that to Kiffin a season ago when he lost to LSU, a game they should have won, and then lost to Kentucky and Florida, both of whom were unranked in a game they should have won. If Lane Kiffin steps into LSU and pulls a Brian Kelly, what is his legacy?
Failure. It will be that of someone who couldn't win the big game. I think people will start to question why he ran from Ole Miss. Look, Ole Miss had a championship caliber roster last year. He lost at home to Kentucky because he was distracted. Bottom line, there were things going on in his personal life, and he was distracted. They lost a game at LSU in overtime that they should have won, and then they lost a game at Florida against a team that really had nothing to play for, and that knocked them out of the playoffs. He didn't play a star running back for reasons that he's never fully explained. A kid that ended up playing in the NFL this year basically sat on their roster. It was never explained. And then this year, at 11-1, he got it done. Everyone said Lane would tell people you just can't do it at Ole Miss, and people would say you just did it. You're there. You're in the playoff. You're one of 12 teams that can compete for a national championship. You're one of the 12. Vanderbilt went 10-2. They're not going to get to compete for the championship. Miami went 10-2. They're probably not going to get to compete for the championship. There's a world where Notre Dame at 10-2 doesn't get to compete for the championship. You do get to compete for the championship. You got there, and he ran from it. And I think it's safe to ask: is this a person that is scared of happiness? Is this a person that is scared of his own success? Because this should have been a glorious moment for him. The month of November, the last 2 weeks, should have been phenomenal for him. Today's National Signing Day. He could have put together a very strong signing class. Ole Miss has been one of the absolute leaders in the collective space with putting money together to make NIL deals work. He's assembled really good rosters, and yet he kept telling people you can't get those kinds of players to Oxford. And he did. He had 3 first-round draft picks last year. Jackson Dart's a starting quarterback in the NFL this year. Walter Nolan's having a really strong year in Arizona. You absolutely could. It's an odd, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I don't know how the mind works with those sorts of things. But I think in a world where he fails at LSU, and he hasn't failed yet, he might win big. But in a world where he fails at LSU, I think people will look back on this decision, Russ, and wonder, who advised him, who he listened to, and why.
Yeah,
because over 99 out of 100 coaches would have absolutely said, I'm not leaving my playoff team.
So, and I look at it and say, if he's really got $25 million to go and buy a team, he probably will be successful at LSU. Like, I'm not sitting here predicting failure at LSU. He's a great coach, and he's going to have great resources. And that is a great fan base. And big pool of alumni, big pool of donors, a lot of talent in Louisiana, obviously. So if I was predicting, I'd predict that he's going to be successful. I think the risk of failure is a huge risk because there is no third redemption at this point. The character bridge has been burned. I'm curious, the last question in the last 30 to 40 seconds here. What is Lane Kiffin's legacy at Ole Miss 5 or 6 years from now? Do fans get over the hurt and recognize that he delivered something special?
I think so. I think a lot of his legacy will be determined on how Ole Miss does in the next handful of years. Is he proven right that, hey, it's just really, really hard to win there, and he was a special coach that was able to do it? Or, and I think this is more accurate, Hugh Freeze won at Ole Miss. I mean, he did. Before it all melted down, he had Ole Miss on the cusp of being nationally competitive. There's a desire to win at Ole Miss. The fans are willing to do what it takes to win at Ole Miss. I think the legacy will be what maybe could have been, because Lane talked a lot in that E60 and all that stuff about staying someplace where they'll build a statue, staying someplace where it's yours, and Ole Miss offered him that. The one thing LSU won't give him, Russ, that Ole Miss did, and I'm a Louisiana native, LSU's never going to give him total autonomy. And people are going to have their hands in it. Ole Miss, to its credit, sort of did what Alabama did for Nick Saban. Handed him the program and said, tell us what you need. We'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Even if we think it's crazy, we'll do it. We'll figure it out. And he had that at Ole Miss, and he could have stayed there for probably as long as he wanted to. He's only 50 years old. These opportunities would have come up again and again and again. And for him to leave now, it's just, frankly, it's kind of mind-boggling. I really haven't. I keep the one thing. I know you got to go. The one thing that stopped me from ever saying he's gone was this thing in the back of my mind going, I know a lot of football coaches. They're hyper-competitive people. Is he really going to walk away from a team as it's getting ready to play on the biggest stage when these are the games you dream about as a coach? You don't dream about spring football. You don't dream about the opener against Kennesaw State. You dream about the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, a national quarterfinal game. He was going to get to coach one of those at a place like Ole Miss where people would have given him all of the credit. If he wins at LSU, Ed Orgeron won a national title at LSU. Les Miles, who I like a lot as a person, won a national championship at LSU. Lots of people have won at LSU. No one's ever won it. I guess Vaught did in a different era.
Yeah.
But nobody in the modern era has competed for a national championship at Ole Miss. And Lane Kiffin was about to. It was going to be his, again, the crown jewel of his career to this point. He walked away from it. I'm still stunned a little bit.
Well, Neal, this was a great conversation. We'll have to have you back on sometime. Maybe on happier, less chaotic times. We're going to see if the grass is greener for Lane Kiffin. We'll see if the grass is greener for Ole Miss moving forward. Neal, thanks for joining us. We'll be right back after break with Brad Logan from the Logan Sports Network.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a companion podcast to Mississippi Public Broadcasting's documentary Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. Your host, Russ Latino, joined right now by Brad Logan, the Logan Media Network, or is it the Logan Sports Network? I want to get it right.
Yeah, Logan Media Network, and we collaborate with our good friends at the Ole Miss Spirit, and yeah, it's been wild over the last couple of weeks, Russ.
No, I know, and by the way, you've got an amazing setup. Like, I need to duplicate this, Germaine, because Brad's got a really, really cool setup going there. There's a Ludacris song that's floating around out there. One of the lines is, "You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. Hoes don't act right." Your partner in crime, Ben Garrett, who was going to join us today, wasn't able to. Use that line. Was it on a podcast or?
Well, after the university released a statement in regards to Keith Carter and talking about Lane Kiffin, there was a statement released from the university. We went live that evening, and basically at the end of the podcast, he said, "You can't turn a hoe into a housewife," which, I mean, I knew what it meant. I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about 3 6 Mafia or Ludacris.
You're not a big Ludacris fan?
Not a huge fan of Ludacris, but in any event, he basically said the line, and we would learn that Lane watches or did watch everything that everybody did, and for the most part, at least he watched our show when we did our show together, the drive home, and then of course when we would go live during the week. And yeah, he took umbrage of that. And real quick, Russ, to kind of walk everybody through this, at the Egg Bowl, when Lane, we thought, would be celebrating with his team and with his fans, decided to seek out Ben Garrett of the Ole Miss Spirit and basically had a couple of choice words for Ben. People were saying that Ben followed him in the tunnel. No, that's the direction we were all going, because that's where the press conference was. In the press conference, which should have been celebratory, was anything but. It was kind of like a funeral procession. And I think the hay was in the barn, so to speak, in regards to Lane Kiffin. And he asked Ben about the comment again when Ben asked a question, and it kind of got a little tense. But at the end, there was a question asked by Ben, the last question. It was answered respectfully, and Lane would eventually call Ben and apologize, and Ben would in return apologize for anything that he might have done. But, yeah, I mean, it kind of blew up, and then it went national, and that's just kind of the absurdity in many ways of the Lane Kiffin experience in Oxford. It was a 5-year run, and it was insane. But I'll be honest with you, Russ, I had nothing but positive interactions with Lane Kiffin. He was always very respectful to me. We had a very good working relationship. And, I can't see anything, negative on my end. It was all the outside stuff and the outside noise that made it an absolute train wreck. If you look at it outside the lines. Inside the lines, best play caller in college football, one of the best recruiters, and one of the best head football coaches to ever coach at Ole Miss.
Yeah, look, that moment, to your point, was just another sort of proof point, another event in which was a chaotic, really, month of people trying to guess, is he staying, is he going, if he's going, where is he going, what does this mean for his legacy? Because, like you look at the E60 documentary, the ESPN documentary that was put together on The Many Faces of Lane, it obviously documented a history of success and then burnout, right? So whether you're talking about the experience at the Raiders that ultimately ended with being fired by Al Davis and him getting called a con man, or leaving Rocky Top in the dead of the night, or being left on a tarmac, in L.A. and And then you got the Alabama Saban situation where he turned what was a boring offense into a high-octane offense at Alabama. Did great things there, but also was subject to the ass-chewings that Nick Saban talked about and ultimately being fired and sent on his way to FAU. Ole Miss, in a lot of ways, and I want your thoughts on this, but Ole Miss in a lot of ways was the redemption arc. You know, there's that video footage of a young Knox Kiffin, his son, chanting on the airplane, SEC, SEC. He was getting back in the door of the SEC. And I think a lot of people had the vantage point, and really that documentary suggested, this is a man that's matured, who's changed, who sees his family and his commitment to a university differently than what he did in the past. He's not striving for the next best thing anymore. Now, so my question is, it seems like there are people saying all of that was a facade. What's your sense of it?
Well, I think the legacy part is fascinating to me because you look at what Lane did. And you know, I asked the question of Lane a couple of weeks ago. At that point, it was prior to the Egg Bowl. I think it was the Monday press conference leading into the Egg Bowl. The speculation was all over the map. Obviously, you know, we all felt that he was leaving, whether it be earlier on it was Florida, then of course it was LSU, but I did not think he would be coaching Ole Miss next year. And so I asked the question to try to ask about if he would be coaching the playoffs, and he said he wasn't going to talk about any other jobs or anything like that. So I thought, okay. So I dug, and I figured that with one win or two wins, actually, he would be the winningest coach from a percentage standpoint in Ole Miss history. Now, you could dig into that and see that if he lost the next game, that would drop him down. But that wasn't really the relevance of the question. So I asked him, Lane, with two more wins, including a win over Mississippi State and then a possible college football playoff win, you would be the winningest coach in Ole Miss history. How important is that to you, and how important is that to your legacy? And he stopped, and he knew what I was doing because he's smart. And he kind of smiled, and he said, you know, that's a really good question. And he had to think about it. I don't remember the context of the answer. It was something to the fact that that's a really neat stat. At the end of the day, I think he knew that his legacy had kind of already been written. I don't know that he really anticipated that the exit would be this ugly. I did, and you probably did, and everyone watching and listening did. But I think in Lane's thought process is, I'm just going to go to LSU and, you know, everything will be okay. I think at that point, too, he was thinking, if they make it to the SEC championship game, he'll coach it. I also think that he was thinking, I'll just coach the playoffs and then I'll just leave. I'll kick the can as far as I can go. I think they were kicking the can even during the Iron Bowl because at that point it was 20-20. And I think if Auburn wins the game and Ole Miss is getting ready for Atlanta and the SEC championship game, I think we're kicking the can even further, and it makes it even more difficult for Chancellor Boyce and Keith Carter on making a decision on behalf of the university. Oh, and who, by the way, have done exactly what they said they were going to do, protect the university, and that's exactly what they've done.
So do you think Carter's decision was the right decision? Because certainly the big debate right now nationally is, should he have been allowed to continue through and coach the playoffs? Would that have given the Rebels the best chance of winning playoff games? Or did Carter make the right decision? There are a lot of people saying that Keith Carter's decision was petty. Do you agree with that sort of line of thought?
I do not. I do not think it was based on petty at all. I think it was Keith Carter and Dr. Boyce looking out for the university and being steadfast in their word. And here's the reason you can't allow Nick Saban. Here's what frustrates me. I don't know if you had a chance to watch College Game Day this past Saturday, but it was so disingenuous with former Alabama head coach Nick Saban along with Kirk Herbstreit. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I was very frustrated with how they were demeaning Ole Miss and basically saying, and I posted, it's basically, hey, it's Ole Miss, it's LSU. Just go have a seat at the table, the kids' table, Ole Miss. You're not in this conversation. Pretty frustrating. But I think it was a right move for a number of reasons. Number one, today, one of the reasons Ben couldn't be here, it's National Signing Day. And so you punt that if a coach is sitting in the seat and going to LSU. Because in fairness to Lane, the calendar stinks. I get it. But in fairness to Lane, he wants to go to LSU and have the best team possible. Don't you think that if he is sitting in Ole Miss's chair, he's going to be the coach for LSU in 26. He wants the best players to be at LSU in 26. So you can't allow that to happen. Secondly, you can't allow the sitting head coach for LSU to be in your room if the transfer portal window, which is coming up very, very soon, to be sitting in that chair when he's going to be one of the best players for LSU. I think third and most important, you can't have the sitting rival coach you in the playoff that's going to LSU. Another thing, you've got a sitting coach for LSU in your coaching office, head coaching office, recruiting your players to go play with him at LSU. And fifth and finally most important, your assistant coaches that are going to be coaching there are going to be coaching for your players to go to LSU. They're going to be coaching on behalf of it couldn't happen. And to Keith's credit, he was very steadfast. To Dr. Boyce's credit, they were not going to allow that to happen. A decision was made, I think, after the Iron Bowl when it was known that Ole Miss would not be playing in Atlanta, and they had to get ready for the college football playoff. We were live and on location on Sunday afternoon. They had the players-only meeting. We saw Dr. Boyce go in. We saw Keith go in. They all came out. They were very happy. They were all smiles. And the key to me, Russ, is when the players came out, they were very vocal. They were screaming hotty-toddy. They were screaming, for example, Bryson Sanders, the starting center, said, "We're going to win a natty." So they loved the decision that Pete Golding is going to be the new head coach, not the interim, but the permanent head coach. And I think that was a good decision also, by the way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously there's a PR war unfolding, right? He's gone. That's over with. We need to quit belly aching about it. But there's a subsequent PR war unfolding about whether or not he's a villain or a hero or something in between. And I know when he put out his statement, he very much sounded like somebody who wanted to be seen as a victim of a decision made by the university, who claimed that players had essentially begged him to stay on and coach, and that AD Keith Carter had said no to his own players. But then you see players coming out in the last couple of days, they seem to be singing a different tune.
Well, I think there were a lot of inaccuracies in Lane Kiffin's press conference in Baton Rouge. And I think in large part, a lot of that will not matter very soon when the break happens. Charlie Weiss Jr. will be the offensive coordinator for the team during the playoff run. It'll be a question of, does he go back to LSU? I think right now I lean that he probably will. And people have made mention, well, if Charlie Weiss can coach the team through the playoffs, why can't Lane Kiffin? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Charlie Weiss doesn't make anywhere near the decisions throughout a process of a team and a program that has over 60 staffers underneath Lane Kiffin. That's not the same thing. Secondly, I'm not anyway saying that Lane Kiffin's not a good person, but Charlie Weiss is a really high integrity man, and I know the university thinks very highly of him. So when he comes back and coaches the team, I think right now you just have to have a stable situation as best as you can when you're presented with a very unstable situation. And so I think for Ole Miss and Keith Carter and now head coach Pete Golding, you've got to do your best to get a staff together, to get your players together, to get ready for the stretch run. And by the way, I thought the college football playoff was very fair to Ole Miss last night. We'll see. Committee Chair Hunter Yurchek, when asked by Reese Davis about teams that could go up and down, by the way, they said there is a chance an idle team could go up or down. But the good news is Ole Miss should be in the hosting category, and that's great for the university. At the end of the day, I think the move that making Pete Golding the head coach was the best move for a continuancy situation. I think that's good. But at the end of the day, I think Ole Miss is in a really good spot because of what Keith Carter has done in Dr. Boyce.
And I want to talk about the decision. When we get back from break, we got to take a brief break, and then we'll have one quick segment. I want to talk about the decision to hire Golding and talk about what it means for the college football playoffs and maybe a little bit about what it means moving forward for the university. You're listening to The Sit Down. We will be right back.
Destroys the one who hates. The others that you hated, go on about their business. Care less.
So the legacy of Medgar Evers is an understanding of our own humanity and of our own responsibility of seeing that in other people.
He is written out of history. He's just not included as Malcolm and Martin. To me, it's the 3Ms, and Medgar's right up there at the lead.
Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Watch now on MPB Passport. Visit mpbonline.org for more.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Every parent wants their child to grow, to explore, and to dream big. At MPB, we're proud to support families and teachers across Mississippi with trusted educational programming and resources that inspire learning and spark imagination. From PBS Kids favorites to digital tools and early learning support, MPB is here for young minds, engaged classrooms, and families who believe in the power of learning at every age. Empowering families, inspiring learners. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down, heard only here on MPB Think Radio. Your host, Russ Latino, talking with Brad Logan of the Logan Sports Network, has done a great job covering the Lane Kiffin saga. You know, during the presidential campaign, Tim Walz's wife, Gwen, gave a speech at an event, and she talked about turning the page. I'm going to try to not look and sound quite as crazy, but I think Ole Miss needs to turn the page. I think there's some effort to do that right now, obviously with the hiring of Pete Golding as a permanent coach. You do hear some criticism, though, right? From some commentators who are comparing the Pete Golding hire to hiring Zach Arnett at Mississippi State or Matt Luke at Ole Miss. You know, it's a nice feel-good story, but it's a downgrade kind of conversation. What's your response to those sorts of comparisons right now?
Well, I think you have a continuity of the previous regime in Lane Kiffin's program with Pete Golding. And secondly, I don't think that those names that you mentioned had the pedigree that Pete Golding had. Coaching under a legend like Nick Saban, coaching under a great coach like Lane Kiffin, I think just lends itself to understand that Pete Golding's a man for the job. Secondly, if you look at Keith Carter, Director of Athletics, who met with the Players Council very in-depth, and I think when we heard the audio that leaked from the players' meeting about how jubilant the players were when they announced the name of Pete Golding, I think when we heard from Keith Carter and Chancellor Boyce some videos that have leaked out from the Ole Miss X account, that shows just how excited that the players are and how much the appreciation that the administration put into this. At the end of the day, I think if you can continue what you already have with Lane Kiffin, I think, to me, Pete Golding was the answer. I'll be honest, I anticipated it being an interim role. But then when I started thinking about it a little bit more in depth and talking to some different people and, you know, the different people at the university I spoke with, it felt like that this was the best call because there is no uncertainty. Now, I have not asked Keith this, and when I have a chance to visit with him, I will. Did making Pete the head coach right now not give a data point to the college football committee so Ole Miss would go without a sitting head coach for the entirety of a playoff run? I don't know the answer to that, but it makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm not saying you would do that just because this season, but that could be yet another feather in the cap for Pete if you have that sitting head coach. At the end of the day, I've known Pete for a long time, dating back to Delta State. Many people remember that he played there. He walked on at Delta State. When Scott Eicher came, they played together in South Louisiana. And so seeing Pete evolve, going to UTSA, being hired there from Nick Saban, and seeing him grow as a defensive coordinator, I think he's absolutely ready to be a head coach, and this is a great opportunity. And I think it's a great call by Director of Athletics Keith Carter.
There's certainly some continuity that comes there, and it makes sense to me that this would be a part of a message to the college football playoffs is we've got a head coach, right? This is not a lame duck situation, and we're going to move forward as a team. And you saw Ole Miss actually moved up in the college football playoff rankings last night. Now, I know that can change, but that's certainly a good sign because there were people calling for them to move down. What's your sense of whether or not Ole Miss can make a run in the college football playoffs with all of this Lane Kiffin noise surrounding the team?
I think bringing Charlie Weiss back is a huge component of Ole Miss being much more successful in college football playoff. And I'll push back a little bit on people that say that this is so many distractions. Look, this team ended up finishing 5-0 with all the distractions. And the difference between this team and the 98-99 team when Tommy Tuberville went to Auburn in the Pine Box, and you talk about the teams that they're so distracted. Back then you had – fifth-year seniors. You had players that came in at redshirt freshmen. Their dad played at Ole Miss. They were tried and true Ole Miss players. They were all a roster full of Mississippians. And it's just a new day. With the NIL, the roster retention now at 20-25%, and you've got some teams that have 70% roster turnover. I think that just goes to show you that the new day of NIL, there's not as much commitment to quote-unquote programs as it was before. So that's why I don't think you have so much distraction, because there's so much rinse and repeat from this year to next year. You can turn rosters over so fast. Therefore, I don't think there'll be a ton of distraction. This will be a situation where players will have kind of an audition for the NFL, for different programs, an audition for their own team. And then now in the world of NIL, I think Ole Miss has as good a shot as any, depending on what their draw will be. There's some mocks that I saw from On3 that had Ole Miss playing Georgia in the Cotton Bowl. Ole Miss has seen Georgia before. You look at teams they may face. Who's to say that Ole Miss gets red hot and Trinidad Chambliss continues to do things that he could do? Kawan Lacey, the best running back in college football, how he's not mentioned for the Heisman Trophy race, I'll never know. He's as good as anybody in the country. So I really like this team. Defensively, they continue to evolve, and so I think Ole Miss has got a good shot as any to make a nice run in the college football playoff.
One thing, and we'll close up maybe on this thought, Brad, but one thing that strikes me is that adversity has one of two effects on people. It can either force them to crumble, or it can unify them, give them grit and resolve. Having a villain, and at some level at this point, whether it's fair or not, Lane Kiffin is a villain in Oxford. Having a villain can unify people, right? There's a common enemy there at this point. And so there is a chance that this event or sequence of events could actually lead to the rallying of this team. And then to your point about NIL, assuming that we're willing to put the same money in that we offered Kiffin to stay, it seems like Ole Miss will have plenty of resources to build a team moving forward. Brad, thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate it, Russ. It is always a pleasure. And real quick, I will say one word that I put together was galvanization. I think Pete Golding galvanizes his team. I think that's one reason he was chosen, and I think they will fight with him. There's been a lot of side tracks here and there with Lane Kiffin, but you notice that he canceled
Brad,
the press
I hate
conference.
to cut you off, man. We're right up against the break.
I got you. Thank you.
The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio, made possible by listeners like you. Please support Mississippi Public Broadcasting if you get the chance. Today's show produced by Germaine Flood, live stream production by Abram Nanny. For my guest Neal McCready, Brad Logan, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. and join us for next week for an episode of The Sit Down.